Hello, Robert McNeilly here, and I wanted to speak about some novel areas that I found helpful in discovering how to add to my effectiveness in my work. And I want to speak about these just in case there's some relevance to you. Erickson, of course, is a place to start, and there's been a lot written about him and various approaches and so on. But one particular area that I think is not really sufficiently understood or paid attention to is his invitation for us to study anthropology. And this may have been stimulated by his friendship with Margaret Mead, who was married to Gregory Bateson at that stage. And Margaret Mead told a very humorous and humiliating experience that she had talking with some people, some natives in some Pacific island who'd had no contact with Westerners previously. And she was interested in their language. So she pointed to the ground and looked at the native, and he said, "Chumula." Oh, she thought, oh, that's interesting. Then she pointed to the sea, and he said, "Chumula." And she pointed to the sky, and again he said, "Chumula." And she thought, well, this must be a very primitive language that seems to be the only word they had, until she discovered that chumula in this native language meant pointing with a finger. So that idea of studying anthropology is a way of expanding our limits to what certain actions and words and problems are. And also, we can look at the idea of studying anthropology and extend it to studying the anthropology of each individual person, because just as different societies have different contexts and different shared understandings, so with an individual or a couple or a family. So looking at the anthropological perspective gives us a way of expanding our observations, our certainties, and allows us to be more open to find what's going to be helpful for this person. There's a lot that could be said about Erickson, but for the moment I want to emphasize that anthropological contribution. Some other unlikely sources that I want to speak about. First of all, Monty Roberts, who had the identity of being called the Horse Whisperer. Unlike the film, The Horse Whisperer, Monty Roberts had a very particular and individual way of working with horses, so that changes could happen. And I also want to talk about an English woman, Jane Fennell, who had a television series, and she was called the Dog Whisperer, or the woman who listens to dogs. And she had some very interesting contributions to make in relation to dogs that I found really helpful for my understanding of how to be therapeutically useful for each individual client. And the other person I want to speak about is James French, who I've just recently discovered, and he has what he calls the trust technique. And it's basically a mindfulness practice, so that he sits mindfully with an animal, and he's found that this is relevant for working with dogs and cats and horses, and even lions and bears, would you believe? But for the moment, I want to leave that emphasis on my invitation for you to explore the anthropological context of each individual client as a way of enlarging our perspective, increasing our options for observations and for being creative. So I'll speak about the other people in a separate talk, but for the moment, that's my invitation. Have a look at the anthropology and see what you can discover.